bathed in the holy water, and by its touch all the dirty material desires in their hearts were cleansed away. They murmured mantras, beginning with Omkar, and underwent a severe course of austerities. Purport. Every Vedic mantra is called Brahma, because each mantra is preceded by Brahmakshara, Om or Omkar. For example, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:8, Pranavak Sarvavedeshu. In all the Vedic mantras, I am represented by Pranava, or Omkar. Thus, chanting of the Vedic mantras beginning with Omkar is directly chanting of Krishna's name. There is no difference. Whether one chants Omkar or addresses the Lord as Krishna, the meaning is the same. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended that in this age one chant the Hare Krishna mantra, Haranama Eva Kevalam. Although there is no difference between the Hare Krishna and the Vedic mantras beginning with Omkar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the leader of the spiritual movement for this age, has recommended that one chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. For a few months, the sons of Prajapati Daksha drank only water and ate only air. Thus, undergoing great austerities, they recited this mantra. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always situated in his transcendental abode. Since he is the Supreme Person, Paramahamsa, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto him. Purport. From these verses, it is apparent that the chanting of the Mahamantra or the Vedic mantras must be accompanied by severe austerities. In Kali, people cannot undergo severe austerities like those mentioned herein, drinking only water and eating only air for many months. One cannot imitate such a process, but at least one must undergo some austerity by giving up 4 unwanted principles, namely illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. Anyone can easily practice this tapasya, and then the chanting of the Hare mantra will be effective without delay. One should not give up the process of austerity. If possible, one should bathe in the waters of the Ganges or Jamuna, or in the absence of the Ganges and Jamuna, one may bathe in the water of the sea. This is an item of austerity. Our Krishna consciousness movement has therefore established 2 very large centers, one in Vrindavana and the other in Mayapur, Navadvip. There, one may bathe in the Ganges or Jamuna, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and thus become perfect and return home back to Godhead. Text 29. O King Parikshit, Narada Muni approached these sons of Prajapati Daksha, who were engaged in tapasya to beget children, and spoke enigmatic words to them, just as he had spoken to their elder brothers. Purport. The sons of Daksha, O sons of Daksha, please hear my words of instruction attentively. You are all very affectionate to your elder Haryashvas. Therefore, you should follow their path. Purport. Narada Muni encouraged Prajapati Daksha's second group of sons by awakening their natural affinity for their brothers. He urged them to follow their older brothers if they were at all affectionate toward them. Family affection is very strong, and therefore Narada Muni followed this tactic of reminding them of their family relationship with the Haryashvas. Generally, the word nigama refers to the Vedas, but here nigama refers to the instructions contained in the Vedas. Srimad Bhagavatam says the Vedic instructions are like a tree, of which Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripe fruit. Narada Muni is engaged in distributing this fruit, and therefore he instructed Vyasadeva to write this Mahapurana, Srimad Bhagavatam, for the benefit of ignorant human society. Anarto Pashanam Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Adhoksaje Lokasya Janato Vidvamsh Chakre Satvata Sanghitam. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth. People are suffering because of ignorance and following a wrong path for happiness. This is called anartha. These material activities will never make them happy, and therefore Narada instructed Vyasadeva to record the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva actually followed Narada and did this. Srimad Bhagavatam is the supreme instruction of the Vedas, Galitam Palam. The ripened fruit of the Vedas is Srimad Bhagavatam.
Text 30. Gopi Paranadana Prabhu told us that Jiva Goswami and the Tattva-sandarbha, therefore, from what we just heard about the Bhagavatam, Nigama, is accepted as Shruti, even though it's generally considered a Purana, which would mean Smriti. That's Jiva Goswami's conclusion. A brother, aware of the principles of religion, follows in the footsteps of his elder brothers. Because of being highly elevated, such a pious brother gets the opportunity to associate and enjoy with demigods like the Maruts, who were all affectionate to their brothers. Purport. According to their belief in various material relationships, people are to various planets. Here it is said that one who is very faithful to his brothers should follow a path similar to theirs and get the opportunity for promotion to Marudloka. Narada Muni advised Daksha's second group of sons to follow their elder brothers and be promoted to the spiritual world. Text 32. Shukadeva Goswami continued, O best of the advanced Aryans, after saying this much to the sons of Prajapati Daksha, Narada Muni, whose merciful glance never goes in vain, left as he had planned. The sons of Daksha followed their elder brothers. Not attempting to produce children, they engaged themselves in Krishna consciousness. Text 33. The Savalashvas took to the correct path, which is obtainable by the mode of life meant to achieve devotional service, or the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like knights that have gone to the west, they have not returned, even until now. Text 34. At this time, Prajapati Daksha observed many inauspicious signs, and he heard from various sources that his second group of sons, the Savalashvas, had followed the path of their elder brothers in accordance with the instructions of Narada. Una más. Sí. Gracias. When he heard that the Savalashvas had also left this world to engage in devotional service, Daksha was angry at Narada, and he almost fainted due to lamentation. When Daksha met Narada, Daksha's lips began trembling in anger, and he spoke as follows. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that Narada Muni had delivered the entire family of Swayambhuva Manu, beginning with Priyavrata and Uttanapad. He had delivered Uttanapad's son Dhruva, and had even delivered Prachinabhari, who was engaged in fruitive activities. Nevertheless, he could not deliver Prajapati Daksha. Prajapati Daksha saw Narada before him because Narada had personally come to deliver him. Narada Muni took the opportunity to approach Prajapati Daksha in his bereavement, because the time of bereavement is a suitable time for appreciating Bhakti Yoga. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 4 kinds of men: Artha, one who is distressed; Artarthi, one in need of money; Jigyasu, one who is inquisitive; and Jnani, a person in knowledge, try to understand devotional service. Prajapati Daksha was in great distress because of the loss of his sons, and therefore Narada took the opportunity to instruct him regarding liberation from material bondage.
36. Prajapati Daksha said, "Alas, Narada Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice." Purport: Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Sannyasira ulpa chidra sarva loke gai." In society, one will find many sannyasis, vanaprasthas, grihasthas, and brahmacharis. But if all of them properly live in accordance with their duties, they are understood to be sadhus. Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu because he had executed such great austerities that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, had appeared before him. Nevertheless, he had a fault-finding mentality. He improperly thought Narada Muni to be asadhu, or non-saintly, because Narada had foiled his intentions. Desiring to train his sons to become grihasthas, fully equipped with knowledge, Daksha had sent them to execute austerities by Narayana Saras. Narada Muni, however, taking advantage of their highly elevated position in austerity, instructed them to become Vaishnavas in the renounced order. This is the duty of Narada Muni and his followers. They must show everyone the path of renouncing this material world and returning home back to Godhead. Prajapati Daksha, however, could not see the exaltedness of the duties Narada Muni performed in relation to his sons. Unable to appreciate Narada Muni's behavior, Daksha accused Narada of being a sadhu. The words Bhikshur Marg, the path of renounced order, are very significant in this regard. A sannyasi is called Tridandi Bhikshu because his duty is to beg alms from the homes of grihasthas and to give the grihasthas spiritual instruction. A sannyasi is allowed to beg from door to door, but a grihastha cannot do so. Grihasthas may earn their living according to the 4 divisions of spiritual life. A brahmana grihastha may earn his livelihood by becoming a learned scholar and teaching people in general how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He may also assume the duty of worship himself. Therefore, it is said that only brahmanas may engage in deity worship, and they may accept as prasad whatever people offer the deity. Although a brahmana may sometimes accept charity, it is not for his personal maintenance, but for the worship of the deity. Thus, a brahmana does not stock anything for his future use. Similarly, kshatriyas may collect taxes from the citizens, and they must also protect the citizens, enforce rules and regulations, and maintain law and order. Vaishyas should earn their livelihood through agriculture and cow protection, and Shudras should maintain their livelihood by serving the 3 higher classes. Unless one becomes a brahmana, one cannot take sannyas. Sannyasis and brahmacharis may beg alms door to door, but a grihastha cannot. Prajapati Daksha condemned Narada Muni because Narada, a brahmachari, who could beg from door to door, had made sannyasis of Daksha's sons, who were being trained to be grihasthas. Daksha was extremely angry at Narada because he thought that Narada had done him a great injustice. According to Daksha's opinion, Narada Muni had misled Daksha's inexperienced sons, Asadu, Akar, Bakanam. Daksha regarded his sons as innocent boys who had been misled when Narada showed them the renounced order of life. Because of all these considerations, Prajapati Daksha charged that Narada Muni was a sadhu and should not have adopted the dress of a sadhu. Sometimes a saintly person is misunderstood by grihasthas, especially when he instructs their young sons to accept Krishna consciousness. Generally, a grihastha thinks that unless one enters grihastha life, he cannot properly enter the renounced order. If a young man immediately adopts the path of the renounced order in accordance with the instructions of Narada, or a member of his disciplic succession, his parents become angry. This same phenomena is occurring in our Krishna consciousness movement because we are instructing all the young boys in the Western countries to follow the path of renunciation. We allow grihastha life, but a grihastha also follows the path of renunciation. Even a grihastha has to give up so many bad habits that his parents think his life has been practically destroyed. We allow no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, and no intoxication, and consequently the parents wonder how, if there are so many no's, one's life can be positive. In the Western countries, especially, these four prohibited activities practically constitute the life and soul of the modern population. Therefore, parents sometimes dislike our movement, just as Prajapati Daksha disliked the activities of Narada and accused Narada of dishonesty. Nevertheless, although parents may be angry at us, we must perform our duty without hesitation because we are in the succession from Narada Muni. People addicted to householder life wonder how one can give up the enjoyment of Grihastha life, which is a concession for sex enjoyment, simply to become a mendicant in Krishna consciousness. They do not know that the householder's concession for sex life cannot be regulated unless one accepts the mendicant. The Vedic civilization therefore enjoins that at the end of one's 50th year, one must give up household life. This is compulsory. However, because modern civilization is misled, householders want to remain in family life until death, and therefore they are suffering. In such cases, the disciples of Narada Muni advise all the members of the younger generation to join the Krishna consciousness movement immediately. There's nothing wrong with this. 37. Prajapati Daksha said, "My sons were not at all freed from their three debts. Indeed, they did not properly consider their obligations. O Narada Muni, O personality of sinful action, you have obstructed their progress toward good fortune in this world and the next, because they are still indebted to the saintly persons, the demigods, and their father." Purport: as soon as a Brahmana takes birth, he assumes three kinds of debts. Debts to great saints, debts to the demigods, and debts to his father. The son of a Brahmana must undergo celibacy, brahmacharya, to clear his debts to the saintly persons. He must perform ritualistic ceremonies to clear his debts to the demigods, and he must beget children to become free from his debts to his father. Prajapati Daksha argued that although the renounced order is recommended for liberation, one cannot attain liberation unless one fulfills his obligations to the demigods, the saints, and his father. Since Daksha's sons had not liberated themselves from these three debts, how could Narada Muni have led them to the renounced order of life? Apparently, Prajapati Daksha did not know that the final decision of the Shastras, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.541. Divarshi bhutat nandranam pitranam naking karonayam ranicha rajan sarvatmanaya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartam. Everyone is indebted to the demigods, the living entities in general, to his family, to the pitas, and so on. But if one fully surrenders to Krishna, Mukunda, who can give one liberation, even if one performs no yagyas, one is free from all debts. Even if one does not repay his debts, he is free from all debts if he renounces the material world for the sake of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose lotus feet are the shelter of everyone. This is the verdict of the Shastra. Therefore, Narada Muni was completely right in instructing the sons of Prajapati Daksha to renounce this material world immediately and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unfortunately, Prajapati Daksha, the father of the Haryashvas and Savalashvas, did not understand the great service rendered by Narada Muni. Daksha therefore addressed him as Papa, the personality of sinful activities, and Asadhu, a non-saintly person. Since Narada Muni was a great saint and Vaishnava, he tolerated all such accusations from Prajapati Daksha. He merely performed his duty as a Vaishnava by delivering all the sons of Prajapati Daksha, enabling them to return home back to Godhead. 38. Prajapati Daksha continued, thus committing violence against other living entities and yet claiming to be an associate of Lord Vishnu, you are defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You needlessly created a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys, and therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. How could you travel with the personal associates of the Supreme Lord? Everyone okay? Keep going? Keep going? Purport. This mentality of Prajapati Daksha still continues even today. When young boys join the Krishna consciousness movement, their fathers and so-called guardians are very angry at the propounder of the Krishna consciousness movement because they think that their sons have been unnecessarily induced to deprive themselves of the material enjoyments of eating, drinking, and merrymaking. Karmis, fruit of workers, think that one should fully enjoy his present life in this material world and also perform some pious activities to be promoted to higher planetary systems for further enjoyment in the next life. A yogi, however, especially a bhakti yogi, is callous to the opinions of this material world. He is not interested in traveling to the higher planetary systems of the demigods to enjoy a long life in an advanced materialistic civilization. As stated by Prabodhananda Saraswati, Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapur akasha pushpayate. For a devotee, merging into the Brahman existence is hellish. A life in the higher planetary For a devotee, merging into the Brahman existence is hellish, and life in the higher planetary systems of the demigods is will-o'-the-wisp, a phantasmagoria with no real existence at all. A pure devotee is not interested in yogic perfection, travel to higher planetary systems, or oneness with Brahman. He is interested only in rendering service to the personality of Godhead. Since Prajapati Daksha was a karmi, he could not appreciate the great service Narada Muni had rendered his 11,000 sons. Instead, he accused Narada Muni of being sinful and charged that because Narada Muni was associated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord would also be defamed. Thus Daksha criticized that Narada Muni was an offender to the Lord, although he was known as an associate of the Lord. 39. All the devotees of the Lord but you are very kind to the conditioned souls and are eager to benefit others. Although you wear the dress of a devotee, you create enmity with people who are not your enemies, or you break friendship and create enmity between friends. Are you not ashamed of posing as a devotee while performing these abominable actions? Purport. Such are the criticisms that must be borne by the servants of Narada Muni in the disciplic succession. Through the Krishna consciousness movement, we are trying to train young people to become devotees and return home back to Godhead by following rigid regulative principles. But our service is appreciated neither in India nor abroad in the Western countries, where we are endeavoring to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. In India, the caste brahmanas have become enemies of the Krishna consciousness movement because we elevate foreigners who are supposed to be mlechas and yavanas to the position of brahmanas. We train them in austerities and penances and recognize them as brahmanas by awarding them sacred threads. Thus the caste brahmanas of India are very displeased by our activities in the Western world. In the West also, the parents of the young people who join this movement have also become enemies. We have no business creating enemies, but the process is such that non-devotees will always be inimical, the class you gave, toward us. Nevertheless, as stated in the Shastras, a devotee should be both tolerant and merciful. Devotees engaged in preaching should be prepared to be accused by innocent persons. Devotees engaged in preaching should be prepared to be accused by ignorant persons, and yet they must be very merciful to the fallen conditioned souls. If one can execute his duty in the disciplic succession of Narada Muni, his service will surely be recognized. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Ya idam paramam guhyam madbhakteshva vidasiti bhaktim mai param kritva mami vaishyasya samshayaha nachatasman manusheshu kashin me priyakritamaha avitana chame tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. For one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. Let us continue preaching the message of Lord Krishna and not be afraid of our enemies. Our only duty is to satisfy the Lord by this preaching, which will be accepted as service by Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna. We must sincerely serve the Lord and not be deterred by so-called enemies. In this verse, the word saurada nang, a breaker of friendship, is used, because Narada Muni and the members of his disciplic succession disrupt friendships and family life. They are sometimes accused of being saurada gnam, creators of enmity between relatives. Actually, such devotees are friends of every living entity, suridam sarvabhutanam, but they are misunderstood to be enemies. Preaching can be a difficult, thankless task, but a preacher must follow the orders of the Supreme Lord and be unafraid of materialistic persons. 40. Prajapati Daksha continued, if you think that simply awakening the sense of renunciation will detach one from the material world, I must say that unless full knowledge is awakened, simply changing dresses as you have done cannot possibly bring detachment. Purport. Prajapati Daksha was correct in stating that changing one's dress cannot detach one from this material world. The sannyasis of Kali Yuga, who change their robes from white to saffron and then think they can do whatever they like, are more abominable than materialistic grihastas. This is not recommended anywhere. Prajapati Daksha was right in pointing out this defect, but he did not know that Narada Muni had aroused the spirit of renunciation in the Haryashvas and the Savalashvas through full knowledge. Such enlightened renunciation is desirable. One should enter the renounced order with full knowledge, jnana vairagya, for the perfection of life is possible for one who renounces this material world in that way. This elevated stage can be reached very easily as supported by the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam 127. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyat Yashivairagyam Jnanam Chayarahaitukam. By rendering devotional service under the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. If one seriously engages in the devotional service to Lord Vasudeva, jnana and vairagya are automatically manifest in one's person. There is no doubt about this. Prajapati Daksha's accusation that Narada had not actually elevated his sons to the platform of knowledge was not factual. All the sons of Prajapati Daksha had first been raised to the platform of jnana and had then automatically renounced this world. In summary, unless one's knowledge is awakened, renunciation cannot take place. For without elevated knowledge, one cannot give up attachment for material enjoyment.
Text 41. Material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness, but one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness. Then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment distasteful. Those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. Purport. It is said that unless a woman becomes pregnant, she cannot understand the trouble of giving birth to a child. Bandya ki bujibe prasava vedana. The word bandya means a sterile woman. Such a woman cannot give birth to a child. How then can she perceive the pain of delivery? According to the philosophy of Prajapati Daksha, a woman should first become pregnant and then experience the pain of childbirth. Then, if she is intelligent, she will not want to be pregnant again. Actually, however, this is not a fact. Sex enjoyment is so strong that a woman becomes pregnant and suffers at the time of childbirth, but she becomes pregnant again despite her experience. According to Daksha's philosophy, one should become implicated in material enjoyment so that after experiencing the distress of such enjoyment, one will automatically renounce. Material nature, however, is so strong that although a man suffers at every step, he will not cease his attempts to enjoy. Tripyanti neha kripana bahudukka bhajaha. Under the circumstances, unless one gets the association of a devotee like Narada Muni or his servant in the disciplic succession, one's dormant spirit of renunciation cannot be awakened. It is not a fact that because material enjoyment involves so many painful conditions, one will automatically become detached. one needs the blessings of devotees, of a devotee like Narada Muni. Then one can renounce his attachment for the material world. The young boys and girls of the Krishna consciousness movement have given up the spirit of material enjoyment not because of practice, but by the mercy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his servants. Text 42. Although I live in household life with my wife and children, I honestly follow the Vedic injunctions by engaging in fruitive activities to enjoy life without sinful reactions. I have performed all kinds of yagyas, including the Deva Yagya, Rishi Yagya, Pitra Yagya, and Nri Yagya. Because these yagyas are called vratas, vows, I am known as a grihavrata. Unfortunately, you have given me great displeasure by misguiding my sons for no reason to the path of renunciation. This can be tolerated once. Purport. Prajapati Daksha wanted to prove that he had been most tolerant in not having said anything when Narada Muni for no reason induced his 10,000 innocent sons to adopt the path of renunciation. Sometimes householders are accused of being grihamatis, for grihamatis are satisfied with family life without spiritual advancement. Grihastas, however, are different because although grihastas live a householder life with their wives and children, they are eager for spiritual advancement. Wanting to prove that he had been magnanimous, to Narada Muni, Prajapati Daksha stressed that when Narada had misled his first son's Daksha had taken no... Wanting to prove that he had been magnanimous to Narada Muni, Prajapati Daksha stressed that when Narada had misled his first sons, Daksha had taken no action. He had been kind and tolerant. He was aggrieved, however, because Narada Muni had misled his sons for a second time. Therefore he wanted to prove that Narada Muni, although dressed like a sadhu, was not actually a sadhu. He himself, although a householder, was a greater sadhu than Narada Muni. Text 43. You have made me lose my sons once, and now you have again done the same inauspicious thing. Therefore you are a rascal who does not know how to behave toward others. You may travel all over the universe, but I curse you to have no residence anywhere. Purport. Because Prajapati Daksha was a grihamedi who wanted to remain in household life, he thought that if Narada Muni could not remain in one place, but had to travel all over the world, that would be a great punishment for him. Actually, however, such a punishment is a boon for a preacher. A preacher is known as Parivrajaka, an acharya or teacher who always travels for the benefit of human society. Prajapati Daksha cursed Narada Muni by saying that although he had the facility to travel all over the universe, he would never be able to stay in one place. In the parampara system from Narada Muni, I have also been cursed. Although I have many centers that would be suitable places for residence, I cannot stay anywhere, for I have been cursed by the parents of my young disciples. Since the Krishna consciousness movement was started, I have traveled all over the world 2 or 3 times a year, and although I am provided comfortable places to stay wherever I go, I cannot stay anywhere for more than 3 days or a week. I do not mind this curse by the parents of my disciples, but now it is necessary that I stay in one place to finish another task, this translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. If my young disciples, especially those who have taken sannyas, take charge of traveling all over the world, it may be possible for me to transfer the curse of the parents to these young preachers. Then I may sit down conveniently in one place for the work of translation. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Text 44. Shri Sukadev Goswami said, My dear king, Narada Muni is an approved saintly person. When cursed by Prajapati Daksha, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, since Narada Muni is an approved saintly person, when cursed by Prajapati Daksha, he replied, Tad Badam, yes, what you have said is good. I accept this curse. He could have cursed Prajapati Daksha in return, but because he is a tolerant and merciful sadhu, he took no action. Purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Titik Shava Karunika Suridak Sarvadehinam Ajata Shatravak Shantak Sadhavak Sadhubhushanaha. The symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies, he is peaceful, he abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. Because Narada Muni is the most elevated of sadhus, devotees, to deliver Prajapati Daksha, he silently tolerated the curse. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taught this principle to all his devotees. Trinadapi sunichena tarodapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniyak sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Following the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one who preaches the glories of the Lord all over the world, or all over the universe, should be humbler than grass and more tolerant than a tree, because a preacher cannot live an easygoing life. Indeed, a preacher must face many impediments. Not only is he sometimes cursed, but sometimes he must also suffer personal injury. For example, when Nityananda Prabhu went to preach Krishna consciousness to the two roguish brothers, Jagai and Madhai, they injured him and made his head bleed. But nevertheless, he tolerantly delivered the two rogues, who became perfect Vaishnavas. This is the duty of a preacher. Lord Jesus Christ even tolerated crucifixion. Therefore, the curse against Narada was not very astonishing, and he tolerated it. Now, it may be asked, why Narada Muni stayed in the presence of Prajapati Daksha and tolerated all his accusations and curses. Was that for Daksha's deliverance? The answer is yes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that after being insulted by Prajapati Daksha, Narada Muni should have left immediately, but he purposely stayed to hear all Daksha's strong words, so that Daksha might be relieved of his anger. Very interesting. Very interesting. Prajapati Daksha was not an ordinary man. He had accumulated the results of many pious activities. Therefore, Narada Muni expected that after delivering his curse, Daksha, satisfied and free from anger, would repent his misbehavior, and thus get a chance to become a Vaishnava and be delivered. When Jagai and Madhai offended Lord Nityananda stood tolerantly, and therefore both brothers fell at his lotus feet and repented. Consequently, they later became perfect Vaishnavas. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada Muni Cursed by Prajapati Daksha.
got time for one reflection. Yes.
Do you mind if I ask a burning question?
Burning, do it.
In my time in the Krishna consciousness movement, I've many times heard the idea that one has to feel the pain of grihastha life in order to be able to renounce. But Prabhupada says clearly that it's not by the pain of material enjoyment that one is able to renounce, but by the mercy of the sadhus. And so if someone wanted to make the argument that one has to feel the pain of material life, and that is what one will allow one to renounce, one could cite the 41st verse of this chapter where Prajapati Daksha says exactly that. And then Prabhupada goes on to say in the purport kind of that his philosophy is wrong. And so my question is, when looking at the statements of the Bhagavatam, when looking at the verses of the Bhagavatam, can we accept every statement as the highest truth, or do we have to discriminate that some verses are, spoken by less qualified personalities, and so they don't show the highest truth?
It's not necessarily by less qualified personalities per se, but there are also different circumstances. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is encyclopedic in one way. It deals with instructions to many different kinds of people. Of course, that could fit your idea of, people in different levels of consciousness. But your ultimate question is, in a nutshell, what?
If I wanted to preach the philosophy that one has to experience the pain of material life in order to be able to renounce, I could cite this verse.
Well, there are other verses as well. There are other verses. I mean, there's verses as blatant as in the 11th canto, where it's mentioned that one should one should embrace sense gratification and take as much as possible, because then it could be like a fire being put out by an infusion of ghee. You pour too much ghee on the fire, it'll actually go out. Narada Muni spoke that verse. So, I mean, you could take that as well, but it's in a different context. That's why one has to take the Bhagavatam and the instructions of the Bhagavatam and administer it through a guru according to one's particular circumstances.
I heard Gopi Purananabu talking on this subject very nicely. Gopi was very, knowledgeable and very humble and very loyal. And he was speaking about the Gita, and he said that actually Krishna gives instructions, all kind of instructions in the Gita, that if you were to take any one of them out of context, then you could consider to do this. And one of the reasons that Krishna does this is to appeal to all kinds of people, so that they can do what they can do according to where they are and how advanced or not they are, and still go forward. Like, for instance, Krishna appealed to Arjuna's Kshatriya spirit. Kshatriyas have a nature, and if you insult them, they get angry, and they get, the charioteer of the chariot warrior would sometimes, speak some words in the chariot in the ear to fire him up, to get him to, fight. So in that way, he gave instructions through the Gita that could be applied in any place in life, and also could be accepted by those persons in that position to be where they should be and stay. And therefore, in the overall instructions, it says that if you decide to stay there and as karma yogi or a jnana yogi, then you're called a karma yogi or a jnana yogi. And you don't necessarily have to go through the whole, or you don't necessarily go through the whole process to get to bhakti yoga. But at the same time, if you see the body of knowledge as a whole, and that's why it's recommended by Prabhupada in the beginning of the Bhagavatam in his preface, that the only qualification for studying this great book of knowledge is to go through it verse by verse, all the way through, and not jump around, because the tendency to do that might develop a dilettante, or a person who's just taking a little here, a little there, dabbling, and not actually thoroughly understanding the subject. So when our acharyas describe the Bhagavatam as being, like when the prayers that we chant by Sanatana Goswami in the beginning, one of the things he says is that from every syllable pours a flood of prema. So even when we hear these individual verses that may be appeared out of context to say another thing, the result always ends up connecting one to Krishna consciousness properly and bringing one to the lotus feet of Krishna, as the whole first 9 cantos do. Therefore, Gopi was saying in that section of his lecture that in his opinion, the Bhakti program should be to read, first of all of Prabhupada's books, the ones he always mentions, mainly the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, all the way through, cover to cover, without moving around from here to there. And then one will get a comprehensive understanding of how to apply the instructions that appear to be contradictory in a way that proves them to be stepping stones to devotional service.
That brings us to the end of this morning's reading. We're going to be starting again at 3:30 this afternoon, India Standard Time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back soon. Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Vanchakopdrushta Kripasnabe Vichapatitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Natagori Vaishnaviniki Jai. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.